Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session. My name is Leonid Belkins, and I'm a co-founder and CTO at torq.
Hi, and my name is Rob Potvin. I work for Jamf, and I'm a consulting engineer in the EMEA region.
In our presentation today, we will focus on no-code automation, what it is and what kind of benefits it introduces. Then we will talk about how it connects to Jamf Pro and actually a little bit of Jamf Protect as well. We will present very concrete ideas and scenarios of how introducing a no-code automation in integration with Jamf Pro and Jamf Protect makes your operations much more streamlined and efficient. And of course, we will leave you with some ideas, conclusions, and points for follow-up. So our inspiration in establishing torq was a dream to make day-to-day operations of our colleagues much more streamlined and much more efficient. This is sort of like my dream and my personal mission being an engineer. Rob, from your experience as a field consulting engineer with enterprise environments, how important is adopting automation in modern IT?
Yeah, it's very important. I think everyone has that one job that just takes so much time. Either it's clicking here or going to this one website and connecting this or uploading a CSV or just dealing with just those little jobs of data where it would be so much easier if we could automate this. And really what it comes down to is just saving time. And doing it one time, not a big deal. But if you have 3,000 iPads you're bringing in, or if you want to, just kind of remediate or do something without having to think about it because you put the rules in place, automation will just save you that much more time. So in my experience, yeah, we do it all the time.
So we at torq, this is our mission, right? We are a no-code automation and orchestration platform for both security and operations teams. We are a young and a fast-growing company headquartered in Portland, Oregon. And of course, we are a Jamf partner, and we are very happy to show you today very specific automation solutions that we have built together for Jamf scenarios.
Yeah, and if we kind of take a look, who uses automation? Well, a ton of different industries. And you, the Mac admin, are dead center of it. Being an ex-Mac admin before I ever joined Jamf, you're always dealing with things like IT ops or DevOps, or you're working with a security team or network security team. Somehow having a bridge that can connect those, again, to save that time, you will or already are using automation. Now, when we talk automation, we're usually talking some sort of data flow. So in the case of what we're doing here today, we're usually talking of things about Jamf Pro, Jamf Protect. And really when we look at the data flow or automation, and it's like an event, something happens, data, some information about that event or about the device or whatever, just information. So in that case, it's usually in a JSON format. And then we take action on it in some sort of API call, really, or just storing the data. So really, when we look at it, it's in the case of like Jamf Pro, something happens, an event, let's say a smart group membership change, we can webhook. That webhook sends information in JSON format to do something or to give us information of what we want to do to that something. And then we can write back to an API or to another API of another service. Again, that data flow, automating it with some rules saves time.
So a no-code automation is a particular way of implementing automation across these three pillars. And what's unique in our view about it are actually three things. First and foremost, no-code automation is targeting you, the professional with a day-to-day process to be automated. And you build your own automation, not a developer builds it for you, not someone or something else delivers it, but it gives you the ability, by the way, not mattering whether you have programming, scripting, or other experience, you get an ability to express your own day-to-day workflows in minutes. Second point around how we approach automation is very much related to where the industry is at the moment. We are adopting a lot of cloud-based solutions with ease. Therefore, when we approach an automation platform, one of the core properties it needs to have is the ability to connect to any tool any component, anything you have in your stack, and to do this thing with ease without requiring any kind of product upgrades or things like that. And of course, right, automation needs to be able to scale from something very mundane, saving you a couple of minutes, but maybe many, many times, to more and more complex processes, each and every one involving more systems, more steps, more logical considerations, and being able to do both of these types, and of course anything in between, within a single platform is very important. So let's talk a bit about how this concept and its benefits actually connect to Jamf Pro.
Yeah. So again, Jamf Pro is a web-based tool, right? So we want to be able to hook that up and be able to extend Jamf Pro even further. And with no-code automation, we can. Some ideas here are, again, going back to that slide before where we talked about an event happens, something happens. So in this case, we want to trigger an event. We can say smart group membership change or mobile devices enrolled, right? Then if we want to do something with that data, maybe you will see we have some pretty good workflows in place, but if we want to do something with that data we got from that event, we can write back to the Jamf Pro API or again to another service that has an API. So we can use that data. In the case of Jamf Pro, we can come back and be like, okay, a very simple one is to write information on the computer record that can move the computer to a different smart group based on that extension attribute. Something very simple, but very reactive, right? Or again, a missing device, maybe it's automated where we mark it missing at one spot and it automatically is then triggered for wipe because it's automated. It saves us time. It's one less button to click. We just mark it missing and it's gone. It's wiped. So that's some examples there.
So let's take a look at a couple of concrete scenarios, of course, starting with maybe really simple ones, and then making things more interesting and more challenging as we progress. So our first scenario begins with a very simple but yet very common problem with an organization acquiring a bulk of iPad devices and handing out those devices to information employees. And all of these devices come online, get enrolled for central management, but the users unfortunately don't bother to configure any unique names, leaving them all with an out-of-the-box name, which is, quite frankly, in most of the cases, just iPad, right? And that leaves, for instance, the administrator of such an environment with not an easy challenge of having to manage hundreds, maybe thousands of different devices, albeit all of them having a unique name, like iPad. And actually, the challenge is not remaining only on the administrative side. Imagine a situation where you would like to airdrop a certain file over to your colleague, and you're trying to do that. And again, you cannot identify the device belonging to that specific person because additional people and additional devices are in your immediate vicinity. So the solution that we'd like to suggest here with automation is very straightforward, right? Going with the paradigm that Rob suggested, we will start the automation upon an event of a new device enrollment. We will pull the detailed parameters of the device, figuring out if there already is a user associated with it, and we will rename the device in having like a unique name. Let's show how actually this is done in live torq and Jamf Pro scenario. So what we see in front of us right now is the designer of automated torq workflows, and we are creating a new one, calling it rename enrolled mobile device. Our flow is getting triggered, in this case, by an event coming from Jamf. So we will call this trigger, again, Jamf events. Once we did it, all we need to do here is just to grab this webhook URL. Webhook is the underlying mechanism through which events propagate from Jamf over to torq. And now in Jamf configuration, we create a new webhook config. By the way, multiple ones can be created for different events. This one is particularly for enrolled devices. All we do is just pass our webhook in here, make sure we get the data in JSON format, and of course, pick the specific event out of the possibilities available in Jamf Pro. That is it. From this point on, every time a new mobile device gets enrolled, torq will get notified about that. So now coming back to the torq workflow designer, we can actually take a look at an event that has come from Jamf and look at the details, at the data that is arriving with it. So in here, we can clearly see that it's a new iOS device enrollment. This is the first ever event we're getting. And it also contains a little bit details about the device. Our first step on the way to automating the renaming would be to pull all the details that Jamf Pro has about the device using this template step called Get Information for a Mobile Device. We need to provide an ID of the device we are pulling the data from, and we are selecting it visually by navigating the data structure delivered to us in the event. Here is the ID, and this is our integration. While building the workflow, we can also run each and every step in it so that by the time we complete it, we are confident that it works as expected. Every step, such as this, that pulls information, can also deliver us a lot of data, in this case in JSON format, that we can again inspect, understand, make sure that the pieces of information that we need to continue our automated workflow are really inside it. So now in here, we would really like to do the rename. However, we have two options. Option number one is that a user is already associated with this device. And again, we will look into the information we got about the device. And we have a lot of sections here, both the device hardware and the installed applications and different configuration profiles, etc. Particularly associated user, right? There is a dedicated session in the device information in it that we can pull. By the way, there is an easier way to do this thing completely inline. So we go to the mobile device, we pick the location, and here we go, a username. So if a username is actually empty and there is no user associated with the device, we would still like to rename this device, again, picking its ID from the event, because this is the device that has been just enrolled. We would like to pick some sort of unique identifier, despite the fact that there is no user associated with it. So we can look at anything about the device hardware. Probably the most unique thing we could think of, maybe it's a serial number, for example, right? It's something that is very visual on the device itself. And while it doesn't necessarily give us the ability to know whose device it is, we will still be able to distinguish between different ones, and we'll be able to hold the device in our hand and figure out that that's what it is. So serial number, and we'll add the word iPad to the name. That is it. This action will actually rename the device. Of course, in cases where user is associated, our preference would be, again, picking the device ID, and then we will take the username, Sarah, John, whoever owns the device, and we will rename this just usernames iPad, in which case it is very easy to distinguish and understand whom this thing belongs to. That is pretty much it. For better readability, we could put some labels explaining our logic. So for instance, we could say if username is empty or not empty, and in here we could say rename to mobile device according to the user, rename mobile device according to the serial number, anything of that sort, so that whoever is looking at this workflow has a better understanding of what it really does and what is its underlying purpose. So Rob, so far it's been a very simple introduction. How effective is introducing something, apparently that's simplistic, just a couple of steps, right?
Oh, yeah. That saves a lot of time. It just something as simple as just renaming the device, right? Because we always have those challenges. And it could be just organizational, because I know in education, for example, when I do get 300, 400, 500 iPads, I don't want the students to rename the iPads to what they want. So we need to set the name, but we also want to know which iPad is who and so forth. So if we get that information from that event, so the mobile device is enrolled, we get an event, hey, here's the mobile device, we get the information, we got the ID now, we get that information like you've showed us, and then basically, like you said, no code, we can see all the data that's coming in and really define a very simple action based on that API in Jamf Pro, which is an MDM command to rename the device. So it's really a simple flow, but again, when you're enrolling, 2, 3, 4, 500 in a mass enrollment, this is automated in the background. So this would save a bunch of time.
All right. One comment, by the way, we could also add here is that if you would like to do exactly the same logic on devices that were previously enrolled, right, you can use it, but instead of starting with a mobile device enrolled event, you would start by pulling all currently enrolled mobile devices through the Jamf Pro API, running over them and applying exactly the same logic, right? So you can actually not just take the forward moving ones, but also take care of the historically registered device and align them to the same practice.
Yeah, exactly. You said that event could be not an event API like webhook or something. It could be just the play button within torq that is doing the work for you and getting that information. So very, very cool.
Let's take a similar use case, but make it slightly more advanced. So we are still onboarding and enrolling bulk devices that our organization has purchased. Let's say that this time we're talking about Apple TV devices that we are later positioning in either classrooms, if again we're an educational organization, or in meeting rooms for any standard enterprise or business. So when we order a bulk of these devices, right? Again, they are all created with the same out-of-the-box name. And imagine the frustration of someone who would like to screen a certain presentation using AirPlay and getting a list of Apple TV, Apple TV, Apple TV, not knowing which is the one in the room where we're currently meeting. So the solution we would like to propose here is, anytime you would order devices in bulk, you would be able to get either from Apple or through Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager a spreadsheet with serial numbers of the devices you're about to receive. You can grab the spreadsheet, put it, for example, not necessarily, but let's say in Google Sheets, and add the desired name for each and every device. By the way, it doesn't have to be just the name, right? You can think of indeed certain properties according to which the devices will be later on associated to smart groups and different configurations and applications. We'll stick with our example to the name, but the principles are pretty much the same. So how does that look? So the workflow looks somewhat similar, right? It is still being triggered by a Jamf device enrollment event. But we have, in addition, this sample spreadsheet in our Google Drive called devices spreadsheet that has just 2 columns, right? Serial number and the desired device name. So we begin with, again, pulling the device details just in the previous case, but now we also use actions for, as you can see, Google Drive, and we search for this devices spreadsheet, right? By the way, if for some reason it is not found, we can always notify the Mac admin and say device is being enrolled. Unfortunately, we're unable to rename it because we did not find the spreadsheet. Of course, if it was found, let's pull the data inside it and just run over spreadsheet rows until we find a row where the content of the first column is the serial number, and then we will rename the device into whatever is the content of the second column in this row. If we finished running over the spreadsheet without finding the device, of course, we can again notify the administrator and let them know that a device has been enrolled, but unfortunately, we were unable to locate it in the spreadsheet and rename it accordingly. So this is something that is, on one hand, similar to what we've shown, but Rob, in here, it actually takes that principle that you mentioned, which is involving additional systems, right? Slack communication with administrators, in this case, Google Sheets, etc. How powerful, in your opinion, is this ability to make the workflow not only about one specific system, but to start building this glue, this integration between your stack?
Yeah, it's very powerful, and it's just leveraging, again, like you said, like a Google spreadsheet or a Microsoft Excel document. But you basically have a truth, a shareable location of truth. So all your Mac admins there, because sometimes you're not working alone. You have a group of people. You're getting different inventory in. If everyone goes there and updates that, it's we're just limiting it to Apple TV here, but we can associate it with naming the iPads if we wanted to, like the previous example, or even on top of that, like you said, it can not just be about naming. We can add any bits of data here so that it could update an extension attribute in Jamf so that we can decide what apps are installed. So it could be again, we're just looking through the data in Google Docs, but it could be that, okay, let's get the name, but is this going to be in, app mode or in the screen sharing kind of like business display mode? You can decide it again there. So again, these are just the starting examples, but it is kind of limitless and very, very easy to navigate and build upon. Like you were saying, you can start small, but then make it bigger and bigger and integrate things. And the idea of integrating to Slack to notify you, Slack, I'm on it all the time for work, and being able to have the notifications right there, let me know, hey, we couldn't name 6 Apple TVs because they're not there. Oh, let me go fix that for you, and let's run that again, and boom, get it done. Very, very cool.
Absolutely. And of course, the system, Slack is a great example of an enterprise communication tool, but as you can imagine, the system supports to the same extent anything else. Microsoft Teams, Google Chats, Mattermost, and all other solutions in the field. So let's shift gears a bit and create a scenario where we, first of all, actually trigger it upon user's request. And instead of just sending notifications, we are turning automation into something that interacts with users and takes into consideration their decisions. So the challenge here is going to be the fact that in our enterprise environment, all of our users on their Mac don't necessarily have administrator permissions. It comes with associated risks, and it's a great idea to manage your fleet of Mac devices like that. However, certain challenges, for instance, particularly with the remote work throughout the recent year, are causing us, let's say, every time when I need to make a presentation to a business partner that uses a slightly different video conferencing software than the one we use internally, I am finding myself in a situation where I need to update the privacy settings, allow that new software to capture my screen as well, to share presentations, etc., and not having administrative permissions. I'm kind of finding myself in a limbo from time to time. So the solution we would like to suggest for this problem, and actually a plethora of similar issues, is to deliver self-service chatbots, where the triggering event would actually be the user's request, in this case, to get admin permissions on their Mac for a limited amount of time. We can interact with them, ask them for additional details, justifications, allow them to choose things, and then somebody additional may get this, approve, hopefully, the request, and the automation will take place. So here is an example of a user experience of implementing such a use case. So here I am in Slack, and I would like to request this Mac administration capabilities. So I just run a workflow called ask for Mac admin. Immediately, the workflow interacts with me, asking me to provide a justification for my request. And let's say I say that I need to share screen using this new video conferencing software that my business partner uses, this ABCDE, really the hottest video conferencing software now in the market. Administrator or administrators may receive this request, again, in this case in Slack, with justification and all the context, and may choose if they approve it or for some reason not. So let's look at how this workflow looks underneath to understand the mechanics of what we actually implemented here, because this is really important. So again, the trigger is Slack request, and we have defined this parameter, right? Justification. By the way, again, we could define multiple parameters, free text, select from, range, and so on. We begin our journey by verifying that the requesting user, that person on Slack, has an active record in our corporate identity provider. In this case, it's Okta. And if and only if that user is active, we are actually proceeding. Then we will look up in Jamf Pro to make sure that the user has corporate-owned and managed devices so that we could even accommodate their requests. Only then, of course, we would approach our Mac admins. And as you can see, data-driven, we can see the response that was yes. In this case, going back to the flow. And now we can do conditions based on the response of the administrator. So if this thing was approved, then, as Rob has already mentioned, we will pull an ID of a custom extension attributes that allows the users to receive the capabilities that they want, again, via simple calls to well-documented and well-defined Jamf Pro APIs. We will set it to a certain value. We will wait. In this case, 15 minutes is the desired period of time, but it could be pretty much anything. And then we will return it back to its previous state and, of course, notify the user upon receiving the permissions or, again, finishing the flow. As you can see, by the way, we can troubleshoot or observe how our workflow does its job, seeing exactly the path that the steps take, seeing exactly the decisions. And again, as you can see, the user messages exactly 15 minutes apart. Your request has been approved and your privilege session has been completed. So what we've seen here is a slightly more advanced case where we didn't just automate certain bulk events, but we saved a lot of time and provide a much better service to our organizational users by giving them something in a self-service mode. And of course, this additional approval that may be required for some users does not necessarily have to be required for other users. So Rob, again, in your experience, especially when dealing with fleets of devices that need to serve users, information employees on a daily basis, how important is the ability to improve their standard of living, if you will, by giving them such capabilities instead of just opening a ticket somewhere and hoping for the best?
Yeah, I have to admit, this is it is very well thought out. The ability to have that interactivity with the user, just your regular Joe user working on their Mac, being able to use Slack as another form of self-service or like a self-service chatbot to be able to run workflows. In this case, asking for administrative help, I want admin rights. It is very, very cool. And it's not just limited to the admin rights, right? It could be any type of workload you can think of. It's just one example we pulled from a hat, like in a sense where like this is a challenge. We want to be able to approve it. It's not something just anonymous where they go to self-service, click a button, they're admin for 50 minutes. We want to know the reason why. We want to log it. We're using and verifying that the user is part of our, Okta has a device, what the device is. Again, in my form, in my business, in working with, if I work with companies that have Slack, I think this would be a game changer in a sense where, hey, we can use Slack and torq in Slack as an actual interface to get automation done, and then actually have verification from the admins if need be, or from billing or whatever. It can be anything, really.
So after talking a bit about operational use cases, let's shift our attention a bit to security use cases. So Rob, Jamf Protect is a separate product by Jamf that actually focuses not on device management, but actually on device security, right?
Yeah. Jamf Protect, been around for a little while now, but yeah, we're all aware of Jamf Protect. If not, you'll be able to find a lot of information here at JNUC about it. But it is a very specific product in the sense where rather than trying to do everything under the sun when it comes to endpoint protection, we're really focusing on Mac and Apple. It's very well, I would say, matured very well in the last couple of years, and also very pretty robust API and such. I think the uniqueness of what torq brings to something like Jamf Protect is, yes, Jamf Protect is integrated with Jamf on some remediation, but there is always some bits missing where when working with companies that want to use Jamf Protect and they don't have a SIEM, a security information endpoint management, which basically just gathers all that information and could do something and or inform somebody of something happening. So using a tool like torq that can get that information from Jamf Protect and then do something with it is very, very interesting. Not replacing a SIEM, but being able to do something with that information.
So let's take a look at a very typical security operational practice called threat hunting. Threat hunting is a proactive defense practice where some sort of security threat is being identified in one place of your assets, or may actually even come from a feed of identifications elsewhere, and the operational team proactively hunts for traces, indicators of the threat. And if they're found, they're blocked way before it hopefully started affecting and penetrating my environment. So in this particular case, we will rely on Jamf Protect to identify some sort of endpoint threat using a behavioral protection, flag it as an alert with certain related files, and then we will use threat intelligence sources. In our case, it will be VirusTotal, but it could be anything else, to verify that these files are indeed malicious. And if so, we will start blocking them at a very early stage of them trying to approach our environment. So in order to establish this flow, we will start by creating a link between Jamf Protect and torq, very similar to what we did with Jamf Pro. However, with Jamf Protect, there is a greater flexibility. So when we look at the actions, we can actually receive two types of triggers. One would be on alerts, identified malware. Another one would be on particular events, right? Things such as somebody airdropped a file or opened access. So we could act upon these as well. And we could, of course, if we need, define different triggers and assign different workflows to different types of events. All we need to make sure is that, yeah, we'd like to see them in a console as well. And we would like to provide full information to torq within the event. The only remaining thing to configure is to make sure that a plan to which our devices belong is actually using these actions. So this particular plan indeed sends alerts to torq. That is it. We are done with the configuration side. Just to make ourselves familiar, whenever a certain threat alert is being raised, Jamf Protect can provide us a lot of information about it. In particular, for example, a set of files that may be associated with this attack. So when receiving this data, again, we can clearly inspect it, and we can see that in this case, it's a very rich threat detection event with a lot of information. Here are the data, right, about the related files that we can now start using. We will run over each and every one of these related files, and for each of them, we will look up their signature at VirusTotal, the threat intelligence piece. And for instance, in this case, we already did it. And as you can see, it has been identified by 32 different engines as ransomware Trojan, very specific for Mac OS. So this is a malicious file, right? In case there were certain amount of positives, we can raise a flag saying, yes, positives were found. And we can build a list of malicious files that participated in this particular event. Afterwards, again, we can pull up some data about the host on which the threat occurred from Jamf Pro, and then now connect to Jamf Protect and create a custom prevent list, something that we will start blocking these files at a very early stage, right? The moment they try to land on our machine, even before they try to behave. And of course, again, we can notify administrators about what was happening, how many malicious files were identified, and what we actually did. So again, back to Jamf Protect, we can clearly see this automatically created prevent list and the signature, in this case, of a single malicious file in it. So what we did here is we automated the response that Security Operations Group would have done. By the way, as before, we could monitor the exact flow and the exact steps that were happening in each and every execution of this workflow. In this case, we didn't just make our operation more efficient and save time on manual work. In this case, actually, the impact is a little bit deeper because we reduced the exposure time of our organization. And again, think about that the trigger could not necessarily have come from Jamf Protect itself. Think about an email security software flagging a malicious file and us proactively moving and adding into lock list, right? So the amount of combinations here is very, very high. And this brings us to the point that we'd like to make to summarize. The idea with automation is that it connects multiple components in your stack. And it does not necessarily have to be about one particular solution. Although in this case, as you have seen, we are talking and presenting very concrete use cases, particularly around Jamf Pro and Jamf Protect. So, Rob, how would you summarize what we've shown and the approach we suggest, of course, taking around the automation in Jamf Pro?
Yeah, well, it says right there on the slide, but it really is. It's very easy. It's very easy to automate that. What I love about the tool and working with the tool is the visual representation, the ability to test each of my little code blocks that I've not code blocks, but little automated blocks that I put in there, so I can run it and get the no code blocks, basically, yes, and get the information that I want, see that kind of data. I think one of the biggest things too is when working with APIs and you're pulling that data, you just get this giant blob of JSON, and you're like trying to look through it, and you format it on some tool. With torq, I get the tree, I get it all laid out, I can pick what I want. Again, the ability to use torq to work on those automated workflows without having to invest a lot of time trying to figure out, which language am I going to use, and so forth. It's going to try to do with Bash. Bash doesn't do JSON that well, or so forth. It's just very, very easy, very competent. And with Jamf Pro, we got the ability to, all the different aspects of events or APIs in there, in Protect as well, and the ability to automate that. And all the information for our APIs and the event-based APIs, classic API, is at developer.jamf.com. Have a look. Some really great information. If you haven't looked in a little while, please do. Again, a lot of people at Jamf worked really hard to create this new documentation here, and it's stellar. Very, very good documentation. And hand it over to you.
I have to say that I enjoyed working with these APIs a lot. And really, after having worked with them for some time, I can say that, a question like, so what capabilities of Jamf Pro are even available for automation is not a legitimate question, because the answer is all of the capabilities of Jamf Pro are available for automation. There isn't like a single thing that you could only do via user interface, but not via these APIs. And this is a real power of being like an API-centric platform, where it is built from the get-go with an understanding that in order to scale, its users will need to automate a lot of workflows around it, which is
agreed.
Absolutely tremendous. Absolutely terrific.
Yep, agreed.
So, as we've shown really slightly, but many other modern IT and security stack components have APIs and event-driven interfaces. So you can automate queries and operations around your identity providers, Okta, Bing Identity, OneLogin, Azure AD, Google Identity, just being some of the samples, right? You can definitely, and we've shown some example, right? Storage. So we've addressed Google Sheets at Google Drive, but it could be pretty much anything. Block storage at Amazon S3, Google Cloud Storage, Microsoft's OneDrive, right? It's all the same paradigm. And they're all, by the way, very API-centric solutions. Messaging, by the way, inline messaging, such as Slack, Microsoft Teams, Google Chat, or ticketing, creating automatic tickets, putting all the data in it, assigning it to the relevant people, sometimes even sort of like moving it into in progress and done stage if we are remediating the problem automatically, and updating the tickets with what was done is also a very big part of it. In terms of sources of events, sources of something happening in our organization, we can easily think about hooking up to HR systems, right? New employee being onboarded, employee leaving on a prolonged vacation, different monitoring systems that can look at user traffic to our application, state of our infrastructure components, and different actions to be made there. Security systems, right? Jamf Protect being the prominent example, but also additional systems raising security events that we investigate, communicate, and orchestrate remediation of. These are the things, right, that are opening us to an ability to think about processes and actually have us, the human operators, sort of like focus on the main things, on what we would like our operational practice to be, right? And the automation will take care of the rest. So if we really had to sum this up with just 3 bullet points, I think they would be: A, no-code automation makes the barrier of entry to automating really, really low. If you have only 15 minutes of free time, you can build an end-to-end automated process in this period of time. If you've never coded, if you've never scripted, if you don't necessarily have a virtual machine available, you can still do it. Second of all, we really cannot overstate it. Jamf Pro and Jamf Protect are API native solutions. They've been built from the very foundation with the thought of APIs in mind. All of the information is being provided very conveniently, very sort of like with a what we call a developer experience, so that you don't just sort of like find yourself in a position where I can do it, but it's kind of inconvenient. You can do it, and it's very convenient, and it's very thought through. And of course, for us, torq, it is extremely important to make sure that an organization that decides to automate their processes with us can actually connect to any piece of their stack, right? Many times I get asked the question, so what is the list of supported integrations? And folks, there's no list of supported integrations. We support any open component that could be automated with API, with CLI, that could send events over webhooks, over messaging queues, over anything. And that's what gives you the power to make sure that you could actually automate pretty much any process in your environment. So thank you, first of all, very much for listening. Rob, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah.
It has been a blast. I learned so much from you.
I've learned so much from you as well. And I have to say, like that one slide you had on there that we're explaining all the different things that torq can connect to. You can ask one person probably looking at this, watching our talk here. I don't think there's not one person that has one or more of all those different services out there. So the ability to connect and automate Jamf Pro with a lot of these services, or Jamf Protect, it's just, yeah, my mind just boggles. I'm going to be learning a lot again in the future. So again, thank you very much for the time, and I hope everyone learned something from this talk, and have a wonderful JNUC.
Absolutely. And if you need more information, feel free to visit us at torq.io or register for a product demonstration here. Rob, I'll be looking forward for more opportunities to do really interesting technical stuff together with you and with Jamf. Thank you.
Agreed.